Hello everyone, it is David again, and we're into our stretch of 80-degree days, so summer is finally here. Very excited that we are moving into Module 3. We've had an excellent start to class. The fire is still burning, so yes, by the time this is done, sweat. It's going to be hot, but for now, it's worth it. Couple things. One is Module 3 runs from May 30th through June 5th. Now May 30th, obviously, I'm not going to be expecting that you log into the class on that day. So enjoy and appreciate Memorial Day, and it's recognition for those who have served our country and for those who do continue to serve our country in the armed forces. Some shout outs. Rebecca, your timeline of inclusion for dolls was amazing. I still can't get over what an innovative idea that was, and actually something that you could probably share with like American Girl. I know that was a doll that you referenced 2012 that they produced a doll with a hearing aid, but that's really an interesting way to look at a timeline of inclusion. So fascinating. 1950, the polio doll, and then in 2000, the sign language Barbie. So really a wonderful job with that. My mom is a doll collector, and one of the things that she has in the corner of what we call the Christmas tree room is a doll probably about the size or the height of this guitar, and it's pretty freaky looking, so my girls don't like to hang around it. I did take a picture of it just to kind of tease them once in a while, but yeah, it is. It's a little out there. I don't know what that doll represents, but it does not have a good aura about it. Tracy, you mentioned a staff member that, let's see, speaking from a staff member who spoke from the perspective of being a parent of a child with a disability, and just how powerful that was and that is. When I went full-time into my dissertation, which should possibly be done tonight as far as the copy that goes to be deposited, the final copy, I'm down to one area on a citation that I need to make sure is all lined up before it goes in. So, and actually through that process it grew like another 22 pages. So, but yeah, I'm down to like something that hopefully in an hour or two I can wrap up tonight and then get that done. But anyway, one of the things that really strikes me about that is it becomes personal. It becomes so much in a context then. And I've had a number of people who've taken this class who share stories about their children with disabilities or their brother or sister or a relative and make it very personal. But one of my experiences I want to talk about is, I do have my timer over here, is when I did go full-time into my doctoral program down at Madison and into my school consulting, I was home in time to pick up my, at that time, second grade daughter from school. So I would show up to school and wait, and typically there was a group of moms, and I think there was a dad too, and we always kind of got there at the same time, a little bit early, and we built a little bit of a friendship, just got to know each other. And one of the moms shared a very interesting experience with me. She was, I don't know if upset is the word to describe it, but she brought her son in later that morning. He has some type of sleep apnea, something to that effect. And she's provided the medical reports to the school, but she indicated that she felt the staff was very, looked down upon her, and that he should have been here at 8 o'clock just like everybody else. And I'm sure there's more to it on both sides of this. But it's not the point of the staff I'm trying to get at, but it's the point of the perspective of the parent. The parent, the more she talked, you could tell she had a high respect for the school and for the staff, and she did not want to look bad in their eyes. That she was, a bad parent who, didn't get her kid to bed, at the right hour at night. And she would talk about how he would wake up several times during the night, and she'd, do everything she could to get him back to sleep. And then he'd come into school and he'd be tired, or else she couldn't get him up in the morning. And but it was this respect and this kind of thought that she would be judged as not being a quality parent. And that's interesting because I'm pretty sure that when she brought her son in and met with school staff, that she put on a defensive posture, and maybe even somewhat blaming or whatever. And we know that happens. But when I saw that side of her, it was really, I think it comes in as we look at Roe this week, and I'll touch on that a little bit more. But there's a connection there. So Janet, you noted that autism wasn't diagnosed until 1943, and yeah, I mean, you also talked about how when you were in school it wasn't something really that was talked about a lot, and I had the same experience. I wasn't very familiar with autism until probably the early 1990s, when I had a few students that I served with autism, and then the caseload grew exponentially. What's happening, so autism has been identified in the United States and in some other countries, but China, for example, does not recognize autism. It's not a medical diagnosis, along with other areas. But one of the things I think that's happening right now is we hear the term mental health, students with mental health needs. But mental health is a very, very wide range. And what's happening is a process called sense making. At least I believe this is what's happening. Is you're seeing things at elementary school that you really haven't seen before at elementary school. The depth of some of the mental health diagnosed conditions, schizophrenia, so forth, with students. And some of this is manifesting without a diagnosis. So what staff are doing are they're saying this is mental health, and then by labeling it, then they can go in and start to acknowledge it, bracket it, categorize it, work with it. It's not a bad thing. This isn't a bad thing. I mean, sometimes labels do have a connotation, but this is a sense this is a step in sense making, which is happening right now. And I just worked recently with a school, still do, I've kind of picked up the consulting a lot more because we're approaching summer. And this district is using an assessment that is not a mental health assessment to identify students with mental health. So working with them on getting some efficacy in their assessments, some empirically based work. So, and not a lot of that's out there. But schools can obtain that, especially if they partner with their local hospital, or something called a Community Health Needs Assessment. Hospitals have had to do them since 2013 under Obamacare, basically. And part of that is a partnership with schools. Part of that involves mental health. So a lot of people don't know about it, but just saying that, probably back in 1943, autism became somewhat of a blanket term too, and then that's kind of how things start out. Is what can't be figured out goes into there, and then eventually it gets stratified out. And I think we're seeing the same thing right now with mental health. And one thing that doesn't happen is the DPI does not take OHI, other health impaired, and break it down into anxiety and depression and these other areas, which are medical, but autism is also medical. So what you have too is OHI is kind of this catch-all. So when you do work with students and you're including students in your classroom, it's very important to work with parents and providers to know mental diagnoses, the treatments that are going on, in different environments for the student, triggers to watch for, things that you can report, just to build that that collaborative network. Because again, this is newer stuff that we haven't seen before. We can meet the needs. Schools always have risen to meet the needs. But we're at that phase right now where autism might have been probably around in 1943. So Module 2 recap, talking about Roe, very motivational, wonderful, her story, and coming back to the perspective of a parent with a student with a disability. So Roe's story reminds me of a conference that I attended a few years ago. It was a breakout session, and there was a dad, and he was up front and started to present, and it was about his daughter, who was maybe, I don't know, 7th, 8th grade at that time, and she had cerebral palsy. But this was his presentation to everybody in the group, which was largely special education directors, pupil service coordinators, special ed teachers, kind of that. He talked about this experience, which I still think about to this day. It was his daughter's friends that rang the doorbell one day and came over and said, let's say Sarah's the name, hypothetically, let's say of this girl with cerebral palsy. Let's say she's 8th grade. Say Sarah's invited to this, this birthday party or bash or whatever it is. But you know what? Like, can we talk to you kind of heart to heart, mom and dad? She's becoming a young lady, and you are dressing her in things that are convenient for you, such as sweatpants and things like that, and nice outfits, but you're doing things for convenience and not really letting her interest show. And she was interested at that time. It was like the Backstreet Boys or something like that. And the dad all of a sudden said, "You're right. You're completely right. We're not taking into consideration the uniqueness and the individual expression of our daughter." So together, these girls plus the parents, they worked and with Sarah, got Sarah some hip jeans, and they were like the bedazzled back then, all styling, and did up her hair and makeup, and with her wheelchair, they totally tricked it out with some different colors and some things. And I remember that he showed the slide, and there was a panel, on a table type thing on the front of the wheelchair. It was clear, and then underneath they had like the Backstreet Boys, like a poster they had cut out, and then they had laminated it so you could look. It was cool. It was just really cool. But it had meant so much to Sarah to have that expression, and I really give credit for her friends, for stepping up. And it wasn't something her parents were trying to oppress. It was just, they never thought about it. They just hadn't, that thought had not crossed their mind. So just a very interesting story I want to share from an inclusion standpoint. 1954, we had the Brown versus Board of Education ruling, and today I think we have kind of something similar on the horizon, and that would have to do with transgender and also the use of bathrooms. So I think that's definitely something that we're going to be looking at in some kind of court, in some kind of court ruling. So another part is opportunities for student mentoring. We go back to Module 2. I think we overlook that a little bit, of the opportunities for older students to mentor younger students, or peers to mentor peers, especially if you have a K-12 building that works really well. But those programs can be substantially beneficial, not only to the student being mentored, whether they have a disability or they're just struggling with reading, or what it might be, and also the mentee gets great benefit out of that. Let's look ahead to Module 3. So hopefully that wasn't you calling me because I did not answer the phone. Module 3. We're going to talk about inclusion and the other kids. I don't know whether to lean in or sit back here. I don't have this fully figured out yet. So, somebody complimented the layout here. Trust me, this is by far the best area of this office right now until all of the dissertation stuff is packed away or shredded and things like that. So yes, this is still the corner that resembles I don't know what it would be, some kind of normalcy down here. So, but inclusion in the other kids, we have articles, we have some videos about that. And I interviewed a teacher who had spent a year in China. Now the interview is like 5 or 6 years old, but it's still very relevant. And it's about 15 minutes long, but you can listen to Greg talk about his experience. And actually, he talks about how there was no inclusion at the time he was there, and I don't think that's changed much. One of the questions I asked Greg is, if a political official came in and had $100,000 and said, "I want my son with MS to attend this public school," I said, "Greg, would that happen?" And he said, "Absolutely not. You cannot. It's not money related. It's all in the belief of the society." And it was just stunning, absolutely stunning to me. And coming down into our last part, what compels you at this point in the class to to either, I guess, preliminarily continue to support inclusion, start to support inclusion, or maybe you're not supporting inclusion as much as you were. I'm not trying to convince you one way or another. But it's a chance to reflect and say, here's where I stand on inclusion, and here's why. So use the materials that we have. I don't know if I have any great, fascinating stories to share with you, although I do have one. We had prom last Thursday, which was pretty fascinating. So. At Wisconsin School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And one of my roles Thursday night was medical safety. So, because we do have some students with some medical conditions, and there was nothing that needed to be done. But on Friday, we had, all of a sudden, about 4 o'clock, the fire alarms were going off in the building, and I couldn't quite figure out what was up. So, the kids are home at that point, but it's residential, so they're there during the week. And started to do a checkout with the custodial and maintenance staff, and had my radio. And what would happen, we have a large garage in the back of the school, and a sensor had got tripped. And basically, but what happens then is it goes right to the fire department. So, unless you reset the system within like 60 seconds, the fire trucks are on their way, which is exactly what happened. So by the time we realized what had happened, and I think they were moving some things in that area, whatever, but fire engines are pulling in, and the sirens and the lights, and I'm going down there with my radio, and I've got my end of the building where there's still some of the people, and I'm just saying everything's fine, stay up there, we don't have. But the fire department's coming off, they're charging, getting the hoses ready, they're going into the building, and of course there wasn't anything. But I was like, sorry about this, although, that I wasn't down there. It's just one of those things that happen, but you feel bad when the fire department has to make a call for something like that. But they're close by, and I suppose sometimes for the fire department it is a nice change of pace to make a call when it's something like that versus maybe the traditional things that you deal with every day. So this Badger shirt is a little too big for me. I did lose. I was 240 pounds a couple of years ago, and I'm down to about 175 because I pretty much run every night. And And so this shirt is big, but I can't get rid of every single shirt that I own. So it kind of does the trick. It works. So, but yeah, I've had to go through my wardrobe and start to get rid of more and more and more clothes that just do not fit, which is it's a good problem to have, because I can tell you at 240 that just wasn't a good place for me to be. So just if you haven't got a glimpse of it, I will move if I absolutely can. I'm not sure what I'm caught on here. So there's the fire. There's the guitar, which belonged to my godfather. And I'd play it for you right now, but that would just make this longer. So have a good rest of Module 2. And as far as, again, next week, I know Monday you're not going to be checking into class, but make sure that then you get in. And there's a couple of you that haven't checked for 4 or 5 days. I'll probably have to do a follow-up, but you need to be accessing the class. You can't be going 4 to 5 days and not accessing the class. And that's just a couple of you. So, and then, probably within a week, I'll update the grades once all of your timelines are graded and put in. So if you don't see a grade right away for your timeline, like, don't freak out. It just means I haven't entered your grade for it yet. Again, I will put a statement in the announcement saying, like, I have entered the grade. So, but all right, enough with me. More with the sunny, awesome weather outside, and we're off to a wonderful start. We're getting into Module 3. Hey, we don't have actually too much left in this class, so thank you very much, and enjoy your day.